My predecessor and some of you here.
What's that you say?
My predecessor came to office determined to see Roe v. Wade overturned.
Who's that now?
And my predecessor are promising to pass a national ban on reproductive freedom.
What you talking about, Willis?
The president, my predecessor.
Huh?
Well, my predecessor.
Who's that?
My predecessor and some of you here.
Who's that you say again?
My predecessor and some of you here seek to bury the truth about January 6th. I will not do that. This is the moment to speak the truth and to bury the lies. Here's the simple truth. You can't love your country only when you win.
And so it went on like that for at least an hour as Joe Biden gave the State of the Union speech, which was more or less a stump speech or that of the like, where he just yelled at you for an hour solid, gave a partisan speech to half the room, didn't unite the country, albeit he ran on unifying the country and returning to normalcy. Well, we haven't quite seen that, have we? And so he went on about his predecessor, which we all know who his predecessor was. Why he doesn't want to call him out by name, it's almost as if he doesn't want him to appear in the room like Beetlejuice if he says his name 3 times. It's kind of crazy. And there were all kinds of assertions and allegations of as if the left and Biden and his team speaks the truth and the right is just a group, a gang that traffics in propagandas and lies. It's kind of silly and ridiculous. And so it went on. And there was, I guess, a lot of the communication about democracy's on the ballot, as I always say, and that this country's going to be ruined to return to leadership under Donald Trump. You know, it's kind of ridiculous. If you don't know your history, you don't go back in history, well, then you are destined to repeat history, especially bad history. But if you don't know or haven't been informed about Donald Trump, he's probably the only person that went to the office and became poorer as a consequence. And not only poorer, but his entire life is just unraveled in terms of people peeling back his personal life and things he said and done and whatnot, and just warped it into this individual that is just trying to be a dictator. And he's trying to be an autocrat. And I don't even think you realize and understand what true autocracy is or true socialist fascist rule is. This guy has been telling the same story for probably 45 years. Watch.
Would you like to be the president of the United States?
I really don't believe I would, Ronna, but I would like to see somebody as the president who could do the job, and there are very capable people in this country.
Most people who are capable are not running for office. Most men are frightened of politics today.
It is a shame, isn't it?
Yes.
It is a shame. The most capable people are not necessarily running for political office, and that is a very sad commentary on the country. They had major corporations and they had this and that, but they are not running for political office.
Why wouldn't someone like yourself run for political office? You have all the money that you possibly need. You've accomplished a great deal, even though you are only 34. I know there's a lot of things that you possibly can do in the years ahead. Why wouldn't you dedicate yourself to public service?
Because I think it's a very mean life. I would love and I would dedicate my life to this country, but I see it as being a mean life, and I also see it that somebody with strong views and somebody with the kind of views that are maybe a little bit unpopular, which may be right, but may be unpopular, wouldn't necessarily have a chance of getting elected against somebody with no great brain but a big smile. And that's a sad commentary for the political process.
It's fascinating, right? I think that, and don't get me wrong, I'm not being the proponent and the spokesperson for the Trump campaign for re-election 2024. I'm simply saying when you're going to make a decision about who you're going to choose, you need to choose the policy and not the personality, not the person. But this person as a person, and I think that the type of person that me and a lot of other people that end up going to the booth and pulling the trigger for, the guy at 34 was already that. And as a business person, an athlete, a competitor, what did you do with your life when you were 34 years old? Whether or not he doesn't always choose the right words and says, I got a small loan from my dad of $10 million. The guy turned himself into a billionaire with $10 million. And at 34, he was already recognized worldwide and even considering or asked to consider as to whether or not he would run to be the president. Very prophetic. That's when the media liked him, or they celebrated him, and his name was brought up in rap songs as being a man of power and influence and wealth and success and prosperity. It was before the dark times. It was before the empire got a hold of Donald Trump and decided to destroy him when he came down the escalator. And even back then, prophetically, in 2015, he was calling the border crisis a crisis. That's almost 10 years ago now. And so he saw all of this coming. All of it. This. Watch.
The president speaking about the economy, something polls show Biden is underperforming on.
My heritage economy is on the brink. Now our economy is literally the envy of the world. 15 million new jobs in just 3 years, a record.
Biden also addressing immigration and border security, another issue that polling shows he trails Trump on by double digits.
From my first day in office, I introduced a comprehensive bill to fix our immigration system. Take a look at it. It has all these and more.
Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, says that he's vowing to fight any voter ID laws. I find this amazing that the Attorney General is telling us he's going to vow to fight voter ID.
It's quite remarkable. You can't rent a car in this country without showing an ID. There's office buildings in Washington, D.C. you can't get into unless you show an ID. But then to vote that you don't need an ID. And the Democrats have basically admitted that one of the reasons they want illegal immigrants is so they can have an inflation in the census and expand the areas that are under Democrat-controlled areas. So they can inflate the Electoral College. They can inflate their representation in the House of Representatives. And just this week in the Rules Committee, Congresswoman Jayapal from Seattle admitted that she thinks that illegal immigrants should be able to vote at least in local elections. That's just a precursor to allowing illegals to vote in federal elections, which is going to dilute the votes of American citizens. So they're trying to do this to dilute votes, to increase representation in the House of Representatives. They're also the Blame America First crowd, and they think that we somehow deserve this influx of immigration for some kind of perceived crimes that Western civilization has committed. Totally backward thinking. But again, going back to Biden, he had 94 executive orders that undermined what Trump did when he was president in his executive orders. Biden could end this crisis tomorrow.
Yeah.
He could reinstate catch and release. He could increase. He could go back for the border increase for the border patrol, and he can make sure that we finish parts of the wall. He could end the asylum program. There's so much that he can do. Again, 94 executive orders. There's one person that can bring those executive orders back, reverse them. That's President Trump. That's why this election is so important.
So you have to give the man some kind of credit. He saw all this coming almost 10 years ago. And of course, Biden ran on, as soon as he took office, the proclamation that he was going to undo all of these racist policies of the Trump administration and essentially rolled back through executive action a lot of these things that had the border under control. And now you've had 3 and 4 years of border crossings that are at an epidemic level that is creating crises in places across the country where these folks are being transported by the border states, whether it's Texas or Arizona, and they're sending them up to Chicago, up here into New York City, and it's becoming a crisis. You do not have the money to be paying for these people to come across the border. Now, of course, you can expedite the asylum process. They come across the border, they get an immediate hearing, and many of them who are not coming for true asylum can be sent back, remain in Mexico. So just by the stroke of the pen, Biden could just undo all of these things through an executive action. But that would be a political win for the right. And of course, it's more important to actually shine in the echo chamber of the political message than to actually go and correct these problems and say, I took executive action to stop the border crossings. We tried it to try to allow people to come in, and now they have abused the policy, and now I have to get it under control. But no, that would be an argument that would actually curry favor not only from people from the right, but you could probably get some folks on the left to come across the center line with you in moderate policy implementation in order to get this whole thing under control. But they said there was never a crisis. It's hard now if there's going to be new video that really walks all of those statements back, especially Mayorkas, who's saying there was not a crisis. But all these different things, all they do is add up to money and insecurity of the nation, as you just allow people to flood across the borders. You don't have a nation if you don't have borders. I'm sorry. That's just the way it goes. You have a fence around your house and you lock the door at night and you beep, beep, also secure your car. But not your country? I don't know. I don't understand. So there was a lot of things on tap during the State of the Union. And the other was reproductive rights. And I just want you to understand that I call balls and strikes when it comes to this messaging from the left and the right. So from the left, you had this messaging with respect to reproductive rights, which, of course, as you know, the left champions. Let's watch.
Biden also discussing reproductive rights, a key issue under his presidency and in his campaign for re-election. Biden polling at 37% favorability versus Trump's 28%.
If you, the American people, send me a Congress that supports the right to choose, I promise you, I'll restore Roe v. Wade as the law of the land again.
One of the guests in the First Lady's box, Kate Cox.
What her family got through should have never happened as well.
The Dallas mother who sued the state of Texas after she was denied an emergency abortion by the state Supreme Court back in December. My colleague Rachel Scott spoke with Kate and her OBGYN, Dr. Damla Karsan, ahead of the address.
What does it mean to you to be invited as a guest? I'm so grateful that the State of the Union is shining a light on this very important issue.
Because Texas has a ban on abortion, the mother of two had to flee her home state in order to terminate her pregnancy in her second trimester after discovering during an early screening that her fetus had a fatal anomaly. Trisomy 18.
You're told that your baby has virtually no chance of survival. So excited for a third baby. It's the hardest news I've ever received. And it's hard to walk around pregnant with a belly. So people ask you, what do you do? What are you having? Do you have a name?
You know, it's hard. You're walking around with a belly. Please. So ridiculous. It's just, I thought, did we just have the Grammys? I thought that just went by. You could have put that acting job on display. Just an opinion, quite frankly. But again, it kind of goes again. This is the exception being used to write the rule. This one particular situation. And those folks, many people, basically like millennials and Gen Z, those college folks that would just say, well, it's just a non-viable clump of cells. That didn't sound like an argument for a clump of cells. So obviously then we are saying that this is a baby, which is, again, shoring up the argument of the right that we need to protect life because she's actually talking about a life. Okay? And that the life has to be terminated. Well, then that comes down to the question of where then does this become from a zygote to an actual viable embryo to it now crossing into the prospects of now it's a baby. Now, of course, if there's a situation that her life was in danger, then of course you have to make the tough decision to save the mother. I don't know who is not going to agree with that, but again, that's where you get into this argument of, well, we have to save the mother, unfortunately, and we're going to have to sacrifice the fetus, the baby. Okay, but that's not the exception that we use to create the rule, and that's what they're trying to say to underscore abortion. But the whole Dobbs decision, which undid Roe v. Wade, was just sending it back to the states to decide how they want to handle this issue because the government should not be in the doctor's office with you. That should be between you, the donor, you who's carrying the baby, your doctor, and whoever you believe is ruling this entire universe. Again, just trying to call balls and strikes. Let's see the rest of that interview.
Her uterus was at risk of rupturing. If she were to continue to carry to term, it could have risked her health and cost her the ability to have a baby in the future.
Kate has had 2 prior C-sections, and so really wasn't a candidate to deliver vaginally. So she would require another C-section, even inducing labor early. Still has risks when you have a scar on your uterus.
Even though she was getting sicker by the day, continuing to carry a non-viable pregnancy, she still couldn't access an emergency abortion in the state of Texas?
Not legally.
It was hard because it was never a matter of if I would have to say goodbye to my baby, but when she survived the birth, she could live maybe a week maximum was best case scenario. How many people have to speak up? How many women have to tell their most painful journey publicly before something changes?
What do you want to see changed?
I hope that in the future, families will get to have those conversations with their doctor. I hope that the law will be different to allow that so that women and families can get the care that they need in their journeys.
Boy, she recovered quickly from the pain associated with the trauma from this whole experience. I didn't realize we were going for the Grammy Award there. Okay? So it's kind of ridiculous. But again, I agree with the premise that, you know what? The states can decide how they want to handle this issue, and then you, your doctor, the donor, and your God can decide how to move forward with this thing. Obviously, it's something that the right has to kind of toe the line on, get closer to the middle on this thing, because it is a losing issue for conservative and right-wing politics. Now, like I say, I call balls and strikes. So I don't know if you hung around, if you were able to, after your 6 Advil, after the State of the Union, to get that pounding in your head down from that yelling that you got for an hour straight. You had to deal also with the Republican response from Katie Britt from Alabama. This right here.
President Biden just doesn't get it. He's out of touch. Right now, the American dream has turned into a nightmare for so many families. From abandoning our allies in his disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan.
From abandoning our allies in his disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan.
To desperately pushing another dangerous deal with Iran. President Biden has failed. We've become a nation in retreat. We know that President Biden didn't just create this border crisis. He invited it with 94 executive actions in his first 100 days. Just think about Laken Riley. In my neighboring state of Georgia, this beautiful 22-year-old nursing student went out on a jog one morning, but she never got the opportunity to return home.
Laken Riley, beautiful nursing student, she never got the chance to return home.
She was brutally murdered by one of the millions of illegal border crossers President Biden chose to release into our homeland. Tonight, enough is enough. Innocent Americans are dying, and you only have yourself to blame. Sadly, we know that President Biden's failures don't stop there. The American people are scraping by, while President Biden proudly proclaims that Bidenomics is working. Goodness, y'all. Bless his heart. We are the
Goodness, y'all. Bless his heart. You see, I call balls and strikes. I could only listen to about 4 minutes of that whole rebuttal before I had to dip, yo. I had to dip, as the kids say. No, I couldn't listen to it. It's just, this is why people hate politics, because it sounds so contrived. It sounds so contrived. You know, just crackling in the voice about Laken Riley. It's so hard to listen to because it sounds so forced. It sounds so forced. It's ridiculous. So it's the problem of the left and the right. And here I am, just trying to give it to you straight down the middle.